My name's Aaron. Welcome to another video. I'm an adventure, landscape, and fly fishing photographer based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today I'm at one of my most favorite local spots. It's called Cypress Falls, and as you can see, there's tons of snow. So we're right in a bit of a deep freeze, and we've had some incredible snowfalls right across Vancouver and North Vancouver. So I thought I would come out today and try to get one of my bucket shots. You probably have all seen the Peter McKinnon bucket shot video on YouTube, where he goes to Moraine Lake and he basically is there for fresh snow, and the lake is not frozen yet, so it's got that beautiful blue water, no tracks, fresh snow, absolutely a gorgeous moment. And it's not that easy to get. It's kind of like you have to be there at the right time and have all the right conditions lined up. So this is my bucket shot. So this is, as I said, Cypress Falls, and there's a beautiful waterfall behind me. It's just hovering around 0 degrees, and we've had that fresh snow over the last couple of days here in Vancouver. It's probably gonna go away. I think this is probably one of the last days, but it's staying cold. And so I decided to come out here and brave the driving all the way out to North Vancouver to hope to get my bucket shot. And as you can see, the conditions are pretty much perfect. They're ideal. The falls are not frozen, so it's not that cold, but I mean, falls typically don't freeze. But mostly there's just fresh snow on everything. The trees, the cliff walls almost, some of the background in there. It's just an absolutely beautiful shot. And mostly it's not tracked right by the falls because it would be quite dangerous to get right in there. Typically I would go down there right on the edge, but today I don't think I'm going to do that. So if there was tracks there, that wouldn't work because I'm going to use some of that foreground. So yeah, it's just a perfect time to be here. The moment's ideal, and I'm getting the shot. So when it comes to gear and camera settings, I'm using the Nikon D750 with my standard 24 to 120 f4 lens. I'm shooting at f16, ISO 100, and that's putting the shutter speed right around 1 second, 1 to 2 seconds, depending on the light. It's quite overcast, so it doesn't really illuminate anything, which can sometimes work, but it also means that all the shadow detail is there and exposed, and there's no glare, no high shadows or heavy shadows and high highlights. So it really makes for a pretty good time to come out. Yeah, so that's basically how I'm doing it. I have a polarizer, which does help to saturate some color, but it also gives me about 1.5 stops of more exposure, more shutter speed, shutter time. So when I'm trying to drag out the shutter speed, if I had just a UV filter in front of the lens or no filter at all, that really would increase my shutter speed by 1.5 stops, sometimes 2 stops, which would mean that my shutter speed probably wouldn't show that shutter drag, which is the slower exposure, which means that the water looks just beautiful and milky smooth. So the polarizer is doing 2 things. One is to help saturate some of the color, although there isn't much in this scene at the moment. But mainly it's actually giving me a slightly slower exposure, which I want. So I'm shooting with the tripod. I'm using the 2-second self timer, and that just makes my camera not shake. I don't have to push the shutter button. I can just give it that couple seconds, get my hands off of it. So that really works well. And that's it. That's basically it. I'm using the histogram to make sure that I'm not clipping any highlights or shadows. So in a scene like this, it would be quite easy to overexpose. The camera tends to want to expose for the highlights, or in some cases the shadows, depending on where you aim the meter of the camera. I'm using like an evaluative meter, so it's kind of just taking a overall meter reading, so it tends to maybe overexpose a bit. So I look at the histogram, and that tells me if I'm overexposing. The histogram shows the shadows on the left and the highlights on the right and the midtones in the middle. And what I'm trying to do, especially with a low contrast scene like this, is I'm trying to expose for the midtones, not clip. And by clipping, I mean having the histogram be pushing up one of the walls on either side. So if it was pushing up the wall on the left side, it would be the shadows, and basically it would be black in the shadows, no way to recover the shadow detail. And if it was on the right side of the histogram, it would actually be the highlights, and the highlights are really hard to recover. So if you lose the highlights, they're gone. So I'm really being careful by looking at the histogram to make sure that I'm exposing more in the middle, and that gives me a really good way of exposing this scene. So that's how that works. And that's it. So after that, you just find the composition. It's a pretty basic composition. I'm using some of these trees to my right to kind of have a foreground with the snow here. Beautiful snow that's untracked. Beautiful waterfall in the background. It's just an absolutely beautiful scene. It's an easy scene to take, easy scene to capture, but it's just gorgeous. And so yeah, so I focus towards the back end. I want the waterfall and those trees that are across the waterfall I need them to be really, really well focused and crisp. But by shooting f/16, I have pretty much everything in the foreground in focus as well. And that's basically how I do it. So I'm gonna go grab that shot now, and then I'll show you that shot. Okay, so I'm getting the vertical shot as well. It's just a really beautiful frame. So one thing I did want to touch on is using a zoom lens. So having the 24-120 f4, it doesn't have to be a fast lens because I'm typically shooting at higher f-stops, like say f16 or f11 for these landscape shots. But what I can do is I can zoom in and zoom out and change my composition and my framing just with the lens without changing the lens, which is really important. I hate changing lenses if I don't have to. And so in this position here, I'm able to shoot super wide, so 24 millimeters, kind of gets everything in the shot. But I can also zoom in to 120 millimeters and really isolate some of the background detail, which is like the waterfall and these fallen trees. So I can get more than one shot in one spot with this lens. So I always have a 24-120 or a 16-35 or a 70-200. Those are the kind of go-tos for me. But I do find that the 24-120, because it's got quite a wide end, and it also has quite a telephoto end, especially in landscape photography. It just is a really, really good go-to lens. So in this case, I've been shooting at 24, then I'm zooming in and shooting at 35 millimeters. I've also zoomed into 120 millimeters so I can get tight shots of the very back end there with the waterfall. So yeah, it's just a really, really nice go-to, and I just wanted to touch on that because I use this kind of setup a lot, and it just gives me a lot of options in one spot. There you go. So I think I'm going to end up moving on to another spot and see if I can find something else. There you go. I hope that you're enjoying this so far, and I will see you in a little bit. absolutely gorgeous. Just beautiful. So I found another composition. Again, it's featuring Cypress Creek. There's a beautiful cascade with these huge old growth trees that have fallen across the creek, with this beautiful cliff wall to the left, beautiful old growth trees to the right, and of course the creek right down the center of the frame. I'm using a polarizer to help cut the glare, and it saturates color, and it's really good with looking down with low light and clear water, because it kind of basically cuts right through and you can see the colors of the rocks down and below. It's a bit of an S-curve zone here, with the creek flowing from my right to my left, with this beautiful rock wall to the left. Snow is all over the entire scene, and there's been no or very few tracks that I can see. So I'm shooting at ISO 100, f16 and 1 second, and I'm shooting at 24 millimeters, so the widest angle this lens will go. And it's a pretty simple composition, but being here again with the right timing is what's making this shot. Having the snow with these fallen trees, and if you look deep into the frame, there's icicles all along the cliff wall. So it's just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that shot now. Okay, so for this last frame of the day, I wanted to focus on doing a really tight, almost a portrait of this tree, the bark of this tree. It's a giant old growth tree, and it's just absolutely beautiful with the pattern that the snow and the moss and the brown wood are creating. So I've basically come in really tight, and I'm filling the frame with a pattern that I've found through the lens. So if you look at it with your eyes, it just looks quite big. But when you zoom in on the tight shot with the lens at 50 millimeters, it just becomes a really, really nice, beautiful scene. So this is gonna be the last frame. I'm gonna shoot it at f11 at 1 second, overexpose a little bit so that I have good detail across the histogram. And I think that'll be it. It's just gonna be a really, really beautiful close-up. Let's get it. This was an absolutely gorgeous day up here in Cypress Falls with the snow. I think I got a couple of keepers, and I do really hope that you're enjoying these videos and learning a little bit about my process in landscape photography. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.